Welcome to West of Tulsa, everybody. I'm CJ Ward. Again, as always, we're broadcasting from Ventura, California. We have a really interesting show for you today. Very excited for this one. We've got a few changes, though. Beth is still gone. She's alive. She'll be back at some point. She promises us that she will come back. All right, Helm's not here. Dan's not here.
No.
But we got to fill in. Alex Zaragoza.
Yes.
Now he's you're coming back, and you were with us, what, one of the first weeks?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He
Very first test show.
And you're still testing.
Still testing. Still pressing buttons here, trying to figure out what's what.
That's all right. That's all right. It keeps things interesting. Is what it does, Alex.
You can get closer to the mic, so we'll
yeah, there you go.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, so we can hear you better.
I was trying not to blast you guys out. But
No, you're good. You're
Okay.
good. You're good.
Well, welcome. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dan's got another gig, so Alex is going to fill in, and hopefully more than just this time. We'll have you back.
no problem.
Knowledgeable car guy from the
That's
Ventura area.
if he wants to come back. He might not want to come
Yeah,
back.
he may not want to.
You know,
Yeah, you're
so.
right. All right, and our guest today, Dan Hayes. Now, you may know who Dan Hayes is. He has his own podcast.
I do.
Binder Boneyards.
Thank you.
And beautiful truck that you drove in here today. Tell us, that should be one of the first questions, right?
Yes, we
All right.
ask our guests.
So what did you drive here today?
1971 International Travelette. It's a 1-ton crew cab pickup. We put a service bed on it to make it more functional, and yeah, it's 4-wheel drive, 1-ton, the old truck.
And we should say he's an international harvester expert. Am I over? I'm not overplaying that, or am I embarrassing you? Is that
A little of both. I don't like to be an expert, because no matter what, someone on the internet will be like, "Oh, no, I got to tell you,
okay.
you're
No, I
those
get
are
that.
those
I
are the
get
real
that.
experts. One
Yeah,
on the internet.
yeah.
of
The
course.
comic book guy characters are just
yeah.
like, oh, actually, it's 1972.
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever.
who use a handle and not their real name? They're the experts.
Yeah, the private
Right.
Instagram accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the experts.
Yeah. We know those guys.
Yeah.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
This is exciting because you went through hell to get here. And Rick, it's not so much what he drove; it's what it took to get to. I can't even begin to explain it. We first came in contact with maybe a month and a half ago, something like that.
Yeah, about.
And you should check out his YouTubes because you do a great job in front of the camera. And here's the thing I love about it. It's so simplified. He just sets up a camera right there on a toolbox and just talks about international harvesters. And it's really interesting.
It's just what I've got in my head. I don't do any prep. I don't do nothing. I walk into the shop on Saturday morning, because it's a weekly, and I go, we'll talk about that. And then I just ramble for half an hour.
Talk about it.
Yeah. I tell a story or something, and whatever.
Well, the first time I watched one of his YouTube videos, I thought to myself, did we overdo it by buying chairs and 8 microphones and
Yes,
a
we
whole
did.
shitload of cameras?
We
and-
absolutely
because
overshot the mark.
Yeah, because Dan does a great job. One simple camera, and he's got a toolbox, and
now we're stuck with it because
Yeah, I
everybody's
know.
used to it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan Rocket. Thank you, Dan. Just kidding.
So, okay, let's go back to the story here. So we came in contact, and you contact actually through the tip line.
Yep.
And you're
Yep.
based in Oregon. Where
Yes.
are you based in Oregon?
Central Oregon. The town's called Terrebonne, which is about half hour north of Bend, Oregon.
Okay,
So a
yeah.
lot of people are familiar with Bend because of the recreation.
Yeah.
It's just a tourist town.
And beautiful country.
Yeah. We're very lucky that I get to have my business there. Like it's a great place to be.
Are you originally from that area?
Well, I'm from we call it the Valley, which is Western Oregon, the part where it rains all the time. That's where I grew up, just outside of Portland. Grew up in the mountains on a small hog farm, and just migrated to Central Oregon during the Great Recession, and once I got there, I vowed I would never leave because it's so nice, and it's
It is beautiful country.
It is.
Now, before we get to the nightmare story of everything you went through to get here, most people are going to wonder, Binder Boneyard. Talk about that. What is the meaning behind that?
So International started out making, farm equipment in the 1800s, and one of the pieces of equipment that they made would take corn stalks, and they would cut it and it would bind it together. And so the slang became corn binder, because because I think International Harvester is really bumpy. Like there's too many syllables there. So
We hate syllables.
So yeah, it's the same with band names, whatever. You just shorten it down and everyone remembers it, So corn binder just was a slang thing that people remembered. And so when I started my business, 10 years ago, I needed a name that international guys would know, because at the time I wasn't trying to cater to the rest of the world. Like scouts weren't popular. Nobody was really into them. They hadn't really taken off like they have now. So I needed a name that international guys would recognize, but not get me sued by international. So, so that's why I picked that. And then the logo is the 3 diamonds, which is international used a triple diamond logo in the 40s. So we modified that a little bit, to keep us safe. And so, that's the.
It's like a legal legacy. You legally safe legacy. You've been able to tap into little pieces of international's history and
just skirt the rules. That's my whole life. Yeah, just skirt the edge. And
I think it's cool though, because this whole time I was thinking. I mean, like most people will think when they hear Binder Boneyard, I was like, oh, he has a binder full of like a 3-ring binder full of things, But when you find out that it's not, and there's
it makes sense.
We learned something new right now. That's just really, really cool.
Yeah, it makes sense. No doubt about it.
I like it.
It's funny because most people call it Binder, and then they think it's my last name. They're like, oh, it's Binder's Boneyard, and I'm like, no, not really. Like, then I have to tell the whole story, and and then they're like, oh, cool, thanks, Binder. Like, whatever. All right, cool.
Boy, I'm glad I didn't fuck that one up. Man, so Binder Boneyard.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I would have felt horrible at this point.
That's how it's spelled Binder.
Binder.
I don't know why people do the Binder.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
Alex,
what?
did you think it was Binder or Binder?
I have to admit, I thought it was Binder.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you think it was the last name?
No, I didn't really give it much thought to why it was that. But, sometimes I look at things and I don't actually read them. But
like instructions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like on the switcher, maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
Dan's feeling really good about you switching the show now.
So let's go back to the story. So we invited you on the show. Mm-hmm. And he says, oh, yeah, I can do it. And then you had the race in Mexico. Talk about that, because you had to go from Oregon.
Back up. There's more to that.
What
was that the truck that they were racing was being worked on here in Ventura. So you had to stop at Ventura first.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. He had to go drive from Oregon down here. But something happened even before he got here.
Yeah.
So what was it?
Well, there were a lot of happenings, I guess. So initially, we're just cramming to build the truck because we have a full-service restoration shop. So I don't get paid to work on my own stuff. And so when we have a personal project, it's like a 2-week, all hands on deck, stay up all night, get it done and get it out so that we can go back to making money. And so we were building this travelette that we had, weeks before pulled out of a farmer's barn. It was 2-wheel drive when we started. Had no drivetrain in it. The floor was rusted out. No bed, or had a bed, but not a service bed. And so anyways, we're just throwing parts at it. It's just stuff I'd been collecting, because that's, I am a hoarder. I do have a collection. I've got over 100 internationals in the yard.
Wow.
We do a lot of restoration work where customers are like, oh, I don't want those old axles. I want these new Curries, or I want something, Dynatract or whatever. So we get stuck with the old stuff. That's how the business started, was I've got stuck with stuff. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll start selling it. And so then the eBay store and all that started. But anyways, we're throwing parts at this truck. I had this 392 that it was rebuilt. It was fresh, I thought. Truck's going together great. Get the motor running. I ran it on the stand first. We have a run stand, so this sort of stuff, we can head it off at the pass. Turns out I didn't let it run long enough. Developed gas was getting into the exhaust was getting into the cooling system. I'm like, well, it's either a head gasket or cracked head. 392s are notorious for cracked heads, so rather than diagnose or try to find another head, we just yarded it out. And I had a 345 that was in another truck in the yard. Supposedly it was a runner, but who knows what decade that was. You know, they're always ran when parked. Every truck you ever get was ran when parked.
Ran when parked, yeah.
So we dragged some stuff out there, fired it up in the truck, let it run for a while, and turns out it was good. So we swung this greasy 345 into the truck. Everything else is beautiful. Like we did the transmission, it's painted, everything's clean, new radiator, new everything under the hood. And then there's this grease ball 345 in there. So fired it up, ran good, continued the build right up until Monday afternoon. I was supposed to be here Tuesday at 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
So Monday afternoon, I'm leaving. I'm apologizing to you guys because I'm not going to make it in time. And then, coming down, it just was like shakedown drama, you know, like I lost a fuel pump and I had vapor lock and just figuring it out. Yeah.
One night, maybe it was the Monday night, I look at the Instagram and I see that he's broken down in the Grapevine.
On the Grapevine, yeah.
Maybe 10 o'clock at night?
Yeah, about then.
And he's so close. You're so close to Ventura after that long drive. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, what a nightmare. But you were able to take care of that.
Oh, yeah. I put the fire out. So that's that was the
there
scariest
was smoke.
part.
I did see the smoke in the video.
I have to prioritize emergencies, and fire was first, and then filming second. Then I call the tow truck. We'd routed an oil pressure gauge because the factory gauges are electric. They sort of work, you know, they don't have any numbers. They just sweep. So you're like, well, I don't know what that means. Is it good or low? Yeah. So we put some mechanicals, just a cheap Napa, you know, whatever, just so I could kind of have some reference. And, because of the adjustments I'd made to the engine to help fight the vapor lock, the exhaust manifolds were getting really hot. Like I could see them. I noticed as I started to climb the Grapevine that through a hole in the firewall, because there's holes there, I could see they're starting to turn orange.
Ooh.
So my timing was slow, and I'm like, I should probably, you know, do something about that. But and then before I could even remedy it, that line melted because it was a plastic one. You know, I thought it had been routed clear enough, and it probably was any other time. But because the manifold got so hot, it melted that plastic line. Hot oil right onto the exhaust manifold, and then just went poof into this fireball. I watched it happen. Like I'm looking through the hole in the firewall, and then just goes, and I look in the mirror, and I got semi trucks trying to get around me, you know, because it's the Grapevine, so it's just tons of traffic. Yank it to the side of the road, and I'm like, you know, no parking brakes. I throw it into gear and shut it off, and pray that it doesn't take off backwards down the hill. And you know, fire extinguisher, and it's a brand new fire extinguisher, so it still has like the plastic on the handle and the thing. And I'm like, oh gee, you know, I'm trying to get the pin pulled out of it and get the hood open, you know, so I can put it out because it's
getting hot.
Yeah. It still has the fender skirts and stuff. I couldn't put it out from the side, so I'm like panic opening the hood, and because I did not want the thing to burn to the ground.
Sure.
You know, like that's the worst case scenario. But got it put out and tow truck to the truck stop, and then bummed a part off of a service truck that just happened to stop there to get gas or diesel, and made it here. I got to Ventura. It was Wednesday morning. Wow. That's how long it just had compounded into a terrible, terrible trip. But yeah, I rolled into Ventura at like 6 o'clock Wednesday morning.
Wow.
Yeah. And then immediately started loading the race car for our trip.
Well, to give people a reference, the Grapevine, probably where you broke down, was probably an hour from. I mean, after all that driving, you were probably an hour or less.
Yeah, it was like 70 miles.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's about right.
Yeah,
so you were so close.
Yeah. I was like checking my phone. I'm like, cool, I'm gonna make it. You know, I'll be able to take a nap before we start working. And yeah, it just happened. Like, you know, sometimes it's self-inflicted, like being in a hurry and just not paying attention. And also, I am the most optimistic pessimist you'll ever meet. So I'm like, oh, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. And then it blows up and I'm like, I knew it. So,
so and the reason you were coming down here was you were participating in a race down in Mexico.
Yeah. I'm a crew chief for a race team. One of my friends, I hate to call guys in the industry competitors because we're all kind of a family. But, I mean, you know how families are. But anyways, he has a big shop in Iowa called Anything Scout. If anybody follows me, they definitely follow Anything Scout. They do high-end Scout restorations, and I've been only using GM drivetrains. They don't mess with the international engines and stuff anymore. But they built a race car, and race car is a pretty broad term. It's slow. I mean, it's a 4-cylinder. He uses the original international 196 4-cylinder, but it fits that vintage class category. It's a 1976. It's right in there with the Broncos and the Blazers, and we're the only Scout in the thing. There's half a dozen Broncos and Blazers, but we're the only Scout.
What's the race called?
It's the NORRA 1000. So it used to be called the Mexican 1000 back in the 60s. And now they revived it in 2012, I think was the first year, or 2013 was the first year of bringing it back. And it's a rally. So it's a stage, there's they call them specials and then transits. So you do 160 miles in the desert, and then you would transit down the highway for 40 miles and then pick the desert back up. And the hope is that you start at 8 in the morning and you finish by 5 in the afternoon, and then that's when I go to work and fixing the car for the next day. Luckily I had another mechanic with me this time. This was my first time. The last year when they did it, I helped on the car locally, and then I couldn't go. Like, it's just too expensive for me. I can't be away from the business that long unless I'm getting paid. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, I just can't be gone. I'll be gone for almost 3 weeks by the time I get home. And so it's a big strain on the business because all my employees and my wonderful girlfriend who is holding down the fort while I'm gone, she's about ready to kill me. So I need to get home and take care of some of those fires.
And we make you stay longer. Oh, blame it on us. Blame it on us.
No. It's fine. She knew this was part of the gig of coming down. That's my whole motto, is just kill as many birds with one stone as you can. And just, I just pack my days with stuff to do.
So that's so it's Mexico, you're going the entire length of Baja. Yeah,
the race was 1,300 miles, just over 1,300 miles from end to end. And so it's a big, it's a long days. And, only a few of those days are in hotels. Most of the time we're camping, which adds another layer of stress. And,
I saw some of the beautiful, in some of your social medias, I saw some of the beautiful spots that you guys were stopping at. Gorgeous.
Yeah. It's definitely, you hate to use the word paradise, but it's, it's nice. It's picturesque. And I've been to Mexico before, spectating some of these races, but never as a crew guy. I've crewed for race teams in America on modern race cars. And that's part of why they invited me, is because I have experience in that, like, fast-paced, like, they come in and it needs an alternator and you have 15 minutes to change it and make sure everything's good. Or, they finished one of the stages with a broken shock. And so you're trying to change this shock out before the next stage or the next day, and like everything's hot and you're like trying to go and like, where's this part? And you're the chase truck, because the problems I had with my truck, I couldn't chase in Mexico with it. It just wasn't reliable enough because we had to go fast to keep up with the stages. So we were chasing out of an F-250 with a canopy. Well, of course, the part you need is at the front, underneath everything or whatever. So when you're setting up for the special or the stage, you're unpacking, you're unloading, you're trying to be ready. So when the car comes in, you're ready. And so it's kind of stressful. But
do you pack and unload at every stop?
No, not normally. It's usually based on the car problems, if there are problems. Some of the stops, they came in and we put in 5 gallons of gas, gave them a burrito, and then they went out again,
The way it should be, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
and the other thing about the rally setup is that you can't be early. Like if they say the transit time is 45 minutes, you don't want to show up in 40 minutes. They actually penalize you for being early.
What?
Like it's strategy. Yeah. So there's actually,
interesting.
so they give you a road book that has the mileage and obstacles in it. And so you're, along with the GPS tracking, you're flipping through the road book to make sure you're on time, because you don't want to be, that's just like I said, it's part of the strategy. You get there too soon, then you're maybe sandbagging in your class. And so, you know, but if you get there, if you're too slow, then it's just penalties and you're a road hazard and you should be in a different class. And, you know, so.
How does the winner get determined? Is it not, it's not just first?
No, it's time.
Wow.
It's time.
That's interesting.
So yeah, the top 3 guys, if I remember right, at the finish, were only 4 seconds apart from each other.
Wow.
Which could be the difference of like checking up on the throttle at the start line.
Wow.
Like you got that much behind, you know. I don't know the actual details of it, but I do know that the top 3 were like extremely close together.
Wow, it's like bracket racing. It's like you can't break out of your class, but you don't want to be too slow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
And you guys did pretty well. And then here's a little more drama that kind of threw you off a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Sean, the driver, and Owen, it was his son, and they were doing a phenomenal job. I mean, we were keeping up with, because our car is extremely challenged with the 4-cylinder. It only makes 73 horsepower. At the wheels, yeah. And the car weighs 4,200 pounds. So, and you're pushing it through the desert and the sand. So it's working, and that's a testament to the International engine, in my opinion. But there's these Broncos in our class that have, you know, 400 horsepower, 347 small blocks, and, you know, coil suspension. Like, they're set up, and we're within 15 to 20 minutes of them at every transit. Like, they're ahead of us, but I mean,
you're within striking distance.
Yeah. If they had one breakdown, we would pass them and be in first place. So it was always, and they knew it. Like, there were a couple of times where we would talk to them, you know, and all the racers are cool, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw you getting close. You know, it's too bad, 4-cylinder, you know, whatever." And so they had a breakdown, and we passed them at one point, but because of getting stuck earlier in the race, they had gotten about 3 hours ahead of us on time. So we couldn't catch them. Yeah. When they're ahead of us 20 minutes every time, you can't make back 3 hours. But our thought was, if they did have a bad breakdown, we would make it past them there. So you hate to hope for anybody to break down, but racing is racing. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to us on the top of a mountain when Sean there was a washout in the road, and it was really narrow. From what I understand, the back tire or the front tire hit this washout, and the Scout started to go over this cliff. I mean, you hate to be dramatic, but it's pretty steep hill, all rocks. You know, Mexico is pretty much just rocks and dirt. And so they started to roll, and it rolled several times sideways before it turned and started going end over end.
Oh.
It probably rolled like 15 times.
Whoa.
It was a solid 300 feet from the road down to where it stopped. And what saved it was it ended up upside down in like a waterfall cutout, because it was a runoff from a storm or something. You know, it had cut into the mountain. If the top of the cage hadn't landed in that depression, it would have kept going.
Oh,
because it's crazy. I've posted some pictures on my social media, but it's really hard to grasp just how, like, it's
the
gnarly.
photos don't do it justice.
You can't. And you look at the Scout, and it's just a wrinkled up walnut. Like, it is just
crunch.
Everything is crunch. The front bumper had a 1/2-inch thick aluminum uprights that held the lights, and the bar for the bumper tore completely in half. Like, 1/2-inch aluminum.
Wow.
Just tore it. Like, somebody just tore it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing that they walked out of it or crawled out of it, because the way it landed, there was only one way out, and it was this little sliver through the window. That was it.
And this was in a remote part.
Yeah, very, very remote.
It's still there, right?
Yeah, the
They
car
have
is there. That we exhausted all of our options. Even the NORRA chase crew with 2 Jeeps and winches went up there. They thought they could get. They're like, oh yeah, we crawl. We go to King of the Hammers and we know our way around the rocks. And they went up there and they were like, good luck leaving it there, because there's nothing they could do. So, what we are working with some locals who have some big tractors who think that they can get it out because. The Mexican people are very ingenuitive and they have a different spirit. Like I think the American spirit used to be like that, like when we built the Golden Gate Bridge in 8 months.
Yeah.
But nowadays we're a little slower, but they're like, oh yeah, no problem. We get it. Wow. I'm like, are you? Oh. And I think it's going to cost like $4,000 to get it out, which is for what the car costs to build. I mean, yeah, we can't use anything off of it anymore. It's pretty much wrecked. But
toast. Huh.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of sentimentality into it. And then there is some parts that I think inside the cab, the dash is still good. The seats are good. I think parts of the engine are still okay. Transmission's probably fine. Like it's, you just
pull
have
some
to
parts
see.
off of it.
Yeah.
But the guys are okay though, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They, Owen, the co-driver, did have to get stitches in his hand, which is pretty remarkable because, like I was telling you, the road book is pretty thick and it's heavy paper, and whatever it was that cut him went through the road book first and then poked him. So if you imagine if he didn't have that book, it probably would have went all the way through his hand.
Going through the book, it would have definitely gone through his hand.
Oh man,
sure.
it could have been so gnarly.
Wow.
And so to have that book, because I don't know if you guys have ever rolled a car or not before, but when you roll, it's the fastest thing ever and the slowest thing ever because it's just stuff is going around and you can't do anything, and you're waiting for it to be over, but you forget like what to do with your hands, and sometimes and some of the cars, the cages, they have handles by the GPS, and that's what the co-driver holds on to. We didn't have that in this setup, but so you're supposed to grab your belts or whatever, and in the heat of the moment you don't know, and it's hard for Owen. He's holding the book, so it's not like I'll let go of the book and grab my belt. Like I know when I've been in panic situations, I'm just like,
tense up.
Yeah. I mean, I've rolled enough scouts and stuff off road and been in some car accidents that like it's all hindsight. And you're like, oh, why didn't I do this or why didn't I do that? But really, it's like at the time you're just holding on, or screaming.
It's almost like the guy that remembers to do that has been in too many accidents to remember that the next time it happens.
Wow.
Yeah. So Owen did go to the hospital to get checked out for a concussion also because he had a black eye. They think one of the spare parts for the car, because the car does carry a few of its own spares just so they can repair in the desert if they had to. One of the spares came loose and hit him in the face. So he had a black eye and he was a little wobbly. He'd asked the same question like 4 times. And so then the race organizers were like, how about we'll take you to the hospital. Yeah. So, which was terrible because the ambulance ride was like 2 hours. Because that's how far it was from the accident to the nearest, to San Juan de Cabo.
So did they take him to the hospital, or did they bring out emergency medical?
They brought it out.
To get him and then go back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was...
and this was close to the finish line.
Yeah.
Fairly close.
Like 23 miles.
What?
Yeah. We'd gone like 1,280 miles.
Wow.
With pretty much, no accidents, I shouldn't say that. We got hit in the silt beds by a guy that crushed our quarter panel, but, that's racing. And so, so it was like, it was bad times.
And you were at the finish line waiting, right?
Yeah, we were at the finish line. We were setting up to take pictures of them crossing the line and, getting ready to go to the banquet and eat our food and, whatever. And, we get the message through the GPS, text through the GPS that was like, cars rolled, bad times, send help, something like that. And
they messaged
yes.
through that? Okay.
Yeah. And we get that, and it's like, what does that mean? Like how, what? Like, because all the stuff's going through your head, and then they sent another one that was like, we're okay, but send help. So, we got a hold of NORRA. They have an emergency phone number. So you call them and you're like, hey, the car's rolled. So then NORRA starts that into motion, which is great. They're a good organization. And so, yeah, that was, it's scary, and then then you start doing the scenarios in your head. You're like, what happened? Like, did I mess up as a crew guide? Like, did the wheel fall off? Did this happen? Did this break? Was it, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to get fired? Like,
Yeah.
But no, it was good. They got out. And
so did you guys book it out to the site from the finish line?
It's too remote.
Really?
Yeah, we ended up meeting them in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, I have a fly that keeps buzzing me. I apologize, but it keeps hitting me in the face. I normally would ignore a fly, but that one nailed me in the face. I'm sorry, you went to the hospital?
Yeah. NORRA told us what hospital they were taking them to, so then we just went there and waited for them.
Oh, wow.
Because at the time they're like, we can't recover the car until the race is over, because there's still people coming through.
Yeah.
And it's just the race course was hot and there's figured stuff out. So, yeah.
Did the drivers or the driver think that there was something that he could have done if he could recall? Like, is it something that was one of those freak things that you just couldn't?
Yeah, from what he thinks is that he just didn't stay to the left enough. And another problem they were having was their radios were cutting out. Because normally Owen, the co-driver, is calling out like, hey, left turn, right turn, slow down, obstacle, because he has the road book. And then the GPS also has notes on it that are marked. And so Sean, the driver, he's just focused on driving. Just, he hardly looks at the gauges. Like Owen does all that. Like, hey, he's constantly calling out oil pressure and, hey, alternator's good or whatever. And so when the comms started cutting out, then I think Sean was doing more looking over at Owen for hand signals.
Wow.
And Owen's trying to plug the comms in and, trying to play with radio and call out hazards. And I think it was just too many distractions and he thought he was fine. Because, it's been 1,200 miles.
Yeah.
It's like, I've made it, the last 1,200 miles were just as gnarly. So what's going to happen here?
Right.
Yeah. It could happen at any mile.
Yeah,
right?
It can. And they tell you that in the meeting, the drivers' meetings and stuff. Like anything terrible can happen. Be ready all the time, and it being in the vintage race cars. Generally, the course is rough, but they're not going out of their way to hurt the cars. So this trail was narrow, and it had some pucker factor. It's a lot of, they call it reveal, where you just look to the bottom. There's nothing to stop you, but never, you wouldn't imagine sliding off of it.
Yeah.
And I think that washout that he got sucked into was probably new from one of the last rainstorms that had come through, or the road had sloughed off. And maybe when the course organizers ran that route to set up the initial race, it wasn't like that. Like, we don't know. That and 150 other cars had gone over that section.
Sure.
So another truck could have washed, loosened something up. It's so hard to tell.
Yeah.
It's all speculation and just armchair in it.
Like the track changes almost constantly,
does.
right?
It does. And the road book will say like, there's a danger or, rocks or something. And then you get there and they're gone. Either they've been kicked out of the way by a truck, because trophy trucks are pretty powerful. They're, I don't want to say destructive, but they move a lot of dirt. And if the course starts out with no whoops or ravines or ruts, by the time the trucks go through there, they're rutted, and so sometimes there's obstacles that aren't in the road book either. So it's just, the road book is like a suggestion, and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
What kind of speeds are we talking about here? And I'm sure the speed varies depending on the terrain and whether it's a straight shot or whatever, but what kind of speeds are we talking about, especially with what you guys were racing?
So on the dry lake beds that are flat and wide open, I saw their GPS get up to 71. Which is, but in the rough stuff, the whoops, the long rollers, they're averaging about 22 to 25 miles an hour, which is still fairly violent,
On the desert roads and when I was going off road, 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour feels a lot faster than what it is. So
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, you hit that corduroy, the washboards, and it's just like it just shakes you.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, in the race car, it's kind of made for that. Like, so you don't notice it as much. But you know, yeah, in a normal truck or car, and like your keychain is shaking, and it just makes everything sound so much worse.
Yeah, yeah.
So overall, though, I mean, I know they're fine, but overall, good fun experience for you guys.
We're gonna call that Type 3 fun, where it wasn't fun when it happened, and I'm not sure it'll ever be fun. At least that part.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Up until then, it was pretty much Type 1. I mean, it was, you know, we had a good time. The crew's good. We had a great group. Larry, one of the other mechanic, and then a guy named Chris was the videographer, photographer, and so. You know, we had a good time and got to see a lot of stuff. Larry's from Iowa. He's only flown once in his whole life. So he comes out here and he's just like, you know, he can't see, he can't open his eyes big enough to take it all in. And it's like, hey, that's the ocean. And I'm like, yeah. You know.
Do you think that the crash, you know, it wasn't enough to where they wouldn't get in the driver's seat again? Like, wasn't that bad, or do you think it's something?
Sean's planning on racing again, but the cost of building another car is up there. You know, so it just depends. But I don't think he's ruled it out. It's not for me to decide. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I have to question a lot of things if I'm rolling 15 times down a side of a mountain or whatever. You know. That's gnarly, dude. Yeah,
and it's like I said, it's tough for us because we're just watching it on the GPS, like, and then getting these cryptic messages, and so, you know, we're all sitting in the chase truck just wringing our hands, like, oh, you know, what do we do? Do we go there? Do we stay here? Do we, you know? So it's just like,
does this did this positively or negatively affect you, like moving forward? Because you have a business and you build these things, and you probably will build a truck for that type of race. Does it get you to think about, you know, quality of work, craftsmanship, to make sure that people driving these trucks don't hurt themselves or die?
Absolutely. I pride myself on the trucks that we build as being, we call them hard use. There's a lot of restoration shops out there that build whatever, not just Scouts, that are like, they're great for weekend cruisers. They're great for going to Cars and Coffee. But you can't drive them 50 miles without worrying about something, you know, like, yeah. And that's kind of a shame in my opinion, because you'll spend 150 grand on a Scout restoration and then you can't leave your town. And it's like, what was the point? So I really pride myself on building hard use trucks. So through my experience, because I've been in desert racing for a long time. My background is industrial fabrication. I was a welder at several big industrial fab shops for years. So I know, like, nothing is more violent than, you know, rock quarry equipment. And so building stuff, I just know what to look for. I've driven enough trucks across the country. I drive, you know, I go to Ohio twice a year, 3 times a year. And so I haul trucks back and forth, and I just know what 1,000 miles on the highways does to trucks, what comes loose, what doesn't come loose. And so, yeah, so through racing, I know what it's, you know, when something fails on the car, I know on a customer truck, I'm like, okay, we're going to gusset that. We're going to add a tab there. We're going to add, you know, extra wire clips or, you know, P-clamps to hold stuff together so it doesn't come apart. Because believe it or not, we get other shops' trucks in sometimes because our reputation for building like hard use trucks is well known. And so a customer will buy a truck from another shop, and then it comes to us for updates, you know, because
get it done right.
I don't want to say right, but done how we do it.
Right.
I'll say it since you won't, so that way you don't get in trouble.
Well, are these updates, as you call them, are they more things that like a shop wouldn't do because they might not have the experience that you have? So it's not maybe a bad thing, or is it really just shoddy work that you're fixing?
Sometimes it's corner cutting.
Yeah.
Like wiring harnesses with no loom.
Oh.
You know, they think, oh, it's hung by these plastic clips, so it'll be fine. But no, you really need to have some loom, you know, or Scotch lock wiring connectors. Like that is the bane of my existence. Those things, because they work great for a year, and then they get some corrosion in them, and then all of a sudden something stops working. And so, you know, a lot of times it's wiring repair, it's brake rerouting. You know, these guys, it's simple stuff like you know, brake hard line needs to move. Like when the master cylinder is attached to the body and then the lines go down the frame, there's movement in between there. Well, you can't just run a hard line right down. Like something's going to break or crack eventually. And that happens. They come in, they're like, the brakes are really spongy. And it's like, well, you got a leak here because it's starting to pull the flare out of the nut because there's no give, you know. So you redo the brake lines with some twists in them and, you know, things like that. Some of it's simple, but these shops don't do them because it's time consuming. You know, some of these guys really pride themselves on getting jobs done in like 6 weeks. I'm like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Like I mean, we work hard, and yeah, our reputation is a little bit tarnished because we do take a long time. Like our builds do take a while. But I really pride myself on the fact that once it leaves, rarely do they come back, and rarely do they go in to other shops for service. We had one time a truck went to Texas. The lady drove it for like 6 weeks, and then it started having ignition problems, and she took it to another shop, and turns out something had come loose, and the distributor had started to turn and change the timing. So I learned from that, and now when trucks leave, like that stuff is checked
Double
again.
check it.
Yeah. So
do you spend some time road testing these cars before you let them out for the customer?
Oh yeah. You know, if it's a full restoration, it's 1,000 miles. I'll put 1,000 on them. If it's like a big job where it's, you know, maybe an engine swap and a suspension thing or whatever, but not a restoration, I'll do 500 miles. Just shake them down, take them on some drives. You know, I'm kind of in the desert of Oregon, so we've got some rough country out there that I can go test stuff out on. And some of the customers don't like that. They want to get their Scout back with the odometer that says 0. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
You don't want that. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll unhook the speedometer cable and then drive it 1,000 miles if you want. Like, whatever. But yeah, I definitely put a lot of miles on them.
And the one thing about this, when we were talking before, how many people specialize in international harvesters around the country? Not many.
No, there's probably only 5 or 6 shops that I would consider international experts. You know, and of those, they might be great at internationals, but they don't have the experience of doing the high performance off-road stuff like I do, or the engine swaps that we do, or some of the updates. You know, I spent years building roll cages in race cars and things like that, so I know how to build really good protective cages that aren't gaudy or weird, and you know, just little things like that. And that's part of why we're so popular and why we're so busy, because we're not using off-the-shelf bolt-in roll bars or show bars that they call them, you know, things like that. So so it's definitely custom.
Small community, everybody kind of knows each other. You guys help each other out when you can. And
Yep. I sell a lot of parts to the other vendors because I'm one of the few guys with an actual, I hate to say the word, but wrecking yard. You know, it's my collection. And then I pull stuff out of it because a lot of these other shops are in industrial areas where you can't have that. You know, I'm lucky to be in rural Oregon, and
you got to have some acreage.
I do have a few acres, and I still get hassled by the county. Like I had to put up a fence around everything, and you know, stuff like that. But I'm fortunate to have the inventory that I have, which sets me apart from a lot of the other vendors.
Yeah. You said you personally owned about 100 or so.
It's just over 100, 130.
Do you remember your first one?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Tell us about that one.
That's what got me going. So 2000, I was my buddies were buying Broncos and Jeeps and Chevy pickup, 4-wheel drive stuff. I was into hunting and things. I liked to bird hunt back then when I had time, but I had a 2-wheel drive Ford pickup. I couldn't do much with that. I wasn't getting around, and so I started looking in the truck trader because there was no Craigslist then. You know,
I remember the truck trader.
Yeah. And so in the back of the truck trader, in the other section, and next to the Vanagons, was this International Scout 66 800. I didn't know what an International was. I'd seen one or two of them, but I didn't know what it was. Well, it was $800. I'm like, perfect. That's the one I want. So go out there. It already had a lift on it. Already had mud tires. You know, it had some hack stuff done to it that at the time I didn't realize was hack. And because I didn't know anything. Like, I was 20. I had minimal mechanical knowledge. My dad didn't teach me anything about mechanics. Nothing. Like, I just a dumb kid with some money.
And you just knew it was $800. That's all.
That's right. And it was red. It was red with a white top. And it was a 4-cylinder with a 4-speed, which I didn't realize how rare that was at the time. And I drove it home. So it checked all the boxes. So got it home, started tinkering, realized that parts were hard to find, you know, because still there's no real internet presence. So if my Napa couldn't get it, then I was out. So that was the curse of International, was that you needed 3 of them to make one good one. That's part of how the business started, you know.
Sure.
So I bought this 800, and then when you buy one, suddenly other ones start showing up in your periphery that you had no idea existed, you know? Just like you guys with your wagon stuff. Yeah. Like, I've been watching that, and then the other day I'm like, oh, look at that.
There's a wagon.
Oh, that's a Volvo wagon with a turbo. Like, what? So anyway, so I bought this 73 Scout 2, which is a different, like, they're bigger, and it had a V8 and power steering, and that spoiled me.
More than $800.
No, it was $700.
Oh, okay. That surprised me. All right.
No, it had been sitting on the highway for sale for so long that when I called the number on it, the guy was confused why I was calling him. I'm like, you have a Scout for sale? And he was like, is that still there? I'm like, yeah, it's still. He's like, I'm like, okay. So we made a deal, and yeah, I drove that one home too. Wow. But it had been sitting, it had 2 flat tires on opposite corners for so long that when we aired them up, the Scout was still stuck. So I drove it home, like, diagonal going down the highway. And that one, you know, like I said, that one kind of spoiled me with the V8 and power steering. And then, so as I was working on them, I was really having trouble finding information. Like, there was no books, very few books and stuff. My high school science teacher, so my uncle says, hey, go talk to old Gary Hedin. He's got a couple of Scouts. So which is weird because I'm, 20, just out of high school, and, I never thought I'd see those guys again. And so I go find Gary, and I show up at his house, and he's got pickups and Travelalls and these other Internationals that I didn't know existed either. And the Travelalls are super cool. Like, he had a 59, so it was all round with the 4 headlights and all this stuff. And so I'm like, oh my God, what are these things?
These
and,
are cool.
Yeah, like, these Scouts are okay, but these are huge, and they're 4-wheel drive. And, it's like, I can sleep in this one. So Scouts were still fun, but I kind of started migrating towards the full-size stuff because of the functionality and just usability of them. So, yeah.
Do you still have your first one, your second one? No, you don't. That's what happens. There's too many folks. Right?
What kind of cars were you into before you got into the Internationals?
Fords.
So Fords.
Ford trucks.
Ford trucks.
My grandpa was a Ford man. I had lived with him for a little while, and he always had Fords, Ford everything.
Sounds like Alex. Mr. Ford man over there.
That's right. I hear you're perfecting the coyote swaps at your shop.
No, not us. No.
Oh boy, you just because you said it, you're starting to start getting calls. Hey, I heard
that. Yeah. No.
It's a joke. It's not for real.
No.
Just disclaimer: he does not do coyote swaps.
No. We don't want to make your life more difficult than it's been the last 2 weeks.
So, you didn't grow up with him, obviously, because you didn't know about him. Then you got into him. What was it that kind of made you like, oh, these are it. This is it.
The oddity, they're so bizarre. They're a forgotten brand. I mean, International went out of business in 1980. Well, they stopped making Scouts in 1980. They folded in, I think, 83 and restructured. But, you know, they got a face only a mother could love. They're either the coolest things or they're the worst things.
Sure.
And what got me is that because of my attitude and my outlook on how I do things is everything's heavy duty. I overdo everything. Everything's to the top. Well, these Scouts, what impressed me, especially the Scout 2s, is that most of their drivetrain is the same drivetrain that you could get in a 1-ton pickup. They just, International, in their effort to, I don't know, simplify things or save money or be cost effective, they were putting the same engine that you could get in a dump truck in the Scout. Like, they're just the same. Different oil pan, different intake manifold, but it's the same engine. So they're extremely heavy duty, just overbuilt, you know.
Do you think that was a part of their philosophy, or was it just because cost efficient? They just had the same assembly line and they just throw them in there? Or?
Both. Internationals have had a history. They are known for heavy duty. You talk to anybody, everyone's got a story, and it's always about how tough they are and how they'd go anywhere. No matter how, even down here, I was getting gas yesterday, and this guy's like, my granddad had a travel all, and that thing would climb a tree, and we'd sunk it in the lake, and, you know, we'd take it there. And everyone has that story. And it's just, it just speaks to me like that. Like, it's part of history. You know, in the early 1900s, International Harvester was the 3rd largest company in the world. The only one bigger was Standard Oil and Philip Morris.
Is that because of the farming equipment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because of the implements, the tractors,
Right.
the way they'd levered, like they were buying up all these other small implement makers, and they were just becoming a juggernaut in the industrial space. And then they started making trucks in the teens and then 20s, and then they started getting that figured out. They were a huge supplier during the war. They supplied trucks to the Marines and the Navy, so, and you'll talk to these, well, they're all dead now, but I remember talking to several guys that had driven them in the war, and they were like, we all wanted the corn binders because, you know, the red 361 would just go. Like, it was way better than the Chevy ones, you know, whatever. I'll probably get hate mail for saying that, but, I'm a little biased anyways, but, it's just, there's so much history. They were making rifles for the Korean War.
Wow.
I've got 2 International refrigerators because they
were in everything.
Do they look like the trucks?
No, these are actually pretty stylish. They're nice, 50s kitchen, it's white porcelain with these crazy chrome handles and the nice emblems and
Total
stuff.
period.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've got one in our house and then one at the shop. And I also have International freezer. That's chest freezer. It's super cool because at the time the dealer networks, they were trying to make the dealerships like a one-stop. So you go there to get your tractor serviced. You could buy a pickup. The old lady could get a fridge if she wanted. They had flashlights, and they just made all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
I didn't realize they were that conglomerate, if you will.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they were. But I think through poor management and overconfidence in the market, it started to hurt them into the 60s. So they stopped making fridges in the late 50s, I believe, and a lot of this other stuff kind of faded away, and then they came out with the Scout in 61, and then that reinvigorated the brand because no one at the time had a small light SUV. There was the Willys wagon, which was kind of clunky. It had like a 40 horsepower engine, and it just was. It just looked weird, it had those flat Jeep fenders and stuff. People, people weren't really into it. There were a lot of people that were, and then there was the Power Wagon because the guys coming back from the war, they love the Power Wagon. So then that was a big truck, like a 1-ton. And so International came out with the Scout, which was smaller, lighter, simple. The windshield folded down like a Jeep. The doors came off, so it appealed to those service guys and the ranchers and getting out. And they were very utilitarian. like just single layer sheet metal, tin can, 55-gallon drum on wheels is what I call them. And that reinvigorated the brand. And then, by the mid 60s, and you saw the Bronco come out in 66, which is like a Scout copy. They just took all the weak points of a Scout and put them in the Bronco. So they came with a V8, or some of them had 6 cylinders, which was more power. And then the suspension was better on the Broncos. I mean, I admit when other manufacturers get stuff right, and the Bronco, if the Scout had better suspension and more power, the Bronco would have had a really hard time competing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But International was so focused on tough trucks that that's how they built the Scout. And, it kind of hurt them. And then the old saying about the Scout was it was too fast for the fields, but too slow for the road. It was a weird, that's just.
But and over there, but like you said, you got your first International Harvesters cheap, $700-800, whatever it was. Values have gone up on those things recently, though.
Man, it's crazy. I kicked myself because I gave away Scout. I scrapped Scouts. I had got rid of some stuff that would be worth a lot of money nowadays, because back then it was. I don't know how many Scouts I got for free. In the early 2000s, I'd pull up to someone's house and I'd be like, how much for the Scout? And they'd be like, oh, just get it out of here. Like, they've been looking at it and they were tired of seeing it. Some lady tried to give me your husband's Scout, and I was like, I'll wait till he gets home from work, Like, I sold a travel all to a guy in Seattle, dropped it off, and was coming out of the neighborhood with an empty trailer, and I just see the top of this Scout over a fence, and I was like, stop, go back, knock on the door, and I asked about the Scout, and she was like, you mean the Jeep? And I'm like, okay, yeah, can I look at it? And it was a Scout. It was an early Scout, 63 Scout. And she's like, just take it. I'm like, I'll hang out until husband gets back, which I'm glad I did, because he comes home and he's like, oh, yeah, I'd sell it. He's like, do you want the other ones? And he had 2 more behind the garage and then a whole pile of parts. I ended up making 3 trips to Seattle to get all the stuff that he had. And I think I got it all for like $1,500. And he thought he was a millionaire, like some dumb kid buying these rusty Scouts. And I ended up doing pretty well selling those parts and selling them.
I'm hearing a theme with Scout or international owners, and maybe you can confirm this, because Alex said that his neighbor had a bunch of Scouts, or someone in your neighbor had a bunch of Scouts, right?
Yeah.
And then CJ, you said when you came out here, you knew a guy that had a Scout just sitting in his front yard or
late
whatever.
70s, early 80s. It sat in the driveway for years. Never saw it run once.
I'm wondering, what is the typical Scout or international owner like, being that you are one? So maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, Scout parts, international parts, are always more expensive, and they're harder to get. Especially back then, it was harder to find parts. The manufacturers just weren't as supportive. So if you needed something expensive, sometimes it took a while to get it. And a lot of times these guys, they just become driveway anchors. And I don't know. It's hard to say. They get sentimentally attached to them. I don't know how many I've talked to guys about that you get the old, I'm going to fix it up someday. I'm like, you're not. Like, the jack stands are getting rusty under it. Like, you're not fixing it, but it's just a fixture to them. And, maybe there's sentiment. There's a lot of sentimentality in them, because you get the stories. Oh, that was my granddad's travel all, and we took it hunting, and I'm going to fix it. Well, maybe they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the money, which is a lot of what our business is guys that have their granddad's Scout, and now they have a job where they have some money and they can pay to have it restored. And so, I mean, we've got 2 going in the shop right now that are family heirlooms that, we're trying to restore them tastefully, but give them the updates that the customer wants to make them safe and, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, the typical international owner in the old days was usually just somebody that didn't have a lot of money. They were the poor, because you could get them for free. And so, yeah, you're like, oh, I'll save a ton of money. But then it turns out you need $1,000 worth of parts that you don't have. And then it's like getting a free puppy. Like it's the most expensive dog ever. So
by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah. You think you're saving money, and really it's a hassle. So, so that's why, and then there's the old timers that have the attachment to them, because it's common. We pull, because one of the things I do is I buy large collections. Like I bought 9 trucks out of Montana last year, and it was the same thing. A guy just was, everyone that he found, he had a thing for him, and he'd drag them home and then just let them sit. And, and then he died and left him with the family, and the family's like, I don't know what to do with them. And so, they call me, and that happens more and more. And that's part of my crusade is to kind of keep the brand alive, because these old guys are dying. Yeah. The guys that taught me stuff are dying. My high school teacher's still alive. He's been on my podcast, and I talk to him all the time. And he's great, and I love that guy to death. But so many of my early mentors have passed away, and they've taught me things that I've been able to teach my crew. And they're like, "Where'd you learn that? Or how did that even work?" Yeah. I'm like, "Oh, Gary taught me," or whoever. And
you have to check out his podcast. Is it really? You really do a very good job. I mean, the thing I like about it's not flashy. No. But it doesn't need to be. I mean, you just sit there and walk somebody through a certain process, and you are passing on that knowledge with the podcast.
And that's why I started doing the video ones, because I've had an audio podcast for 3 or 4 years now. But I started doing the video ones to be a little bit more inclusive and instructional, because I can actually show pictures of what I'm talking about. Because, the number of people that know this stuff is getting smaller every day, and eventually when I die, like, who's after me? Yeah, it's because I don't have kids, and I don't have anybody that I'm passing it on to other than my employees who turn over every couple of years. My one employee's been with me for 4 years now, and I kind of teasing him the other day that, like, he's going to be the only international engine expert before long. Like, he's going to be the one, and it's kind of, I mean, it would be like 32. Okay. So
because we've had a lot of discussions about the next generation learning and passing it on. So I'm that's young enough to keep it going for another 30, 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You're obviously probably involved with the Scout and international community, since it's such a small community, but seems like very tight that you're mentioning. Do you find a lot of interest in with the younger generation in these cars and these vehicles?
Yeah, there's a lot of young guys that are interested in the brand. They don't know the history. A lot of people don't really care. They just think the Scouts are cool. They want one with the LS in it so they can keep up with traffic, and they just want to look cool at Cars and Coffee, which is a thing that happens. I mean, I don't fault them for that. I think it's cool. I would love to have a flashy, like the 49 Ford or something, But as far as workforce goes and things like that, or guys that want to get their hands dirty and fix them, it's getting pretty slim. I have a lot of turnover in the shop with like high school kids that think they're going to learn this stuff, and then, they have a hard time showing up every day, or they don't understand that, like, if they ruin something, that might be the last one in existence. Like, there are certain parts they don't make anymore. And when I have one in the yard that needs to be pulled, and I'm like, be careful. Like, that's because I can't do everything. I have to, I have to turn the responsibility over to the guys. And so I just walk them through it. And there's some guys that don't understand the stuff doesn't exist. Like, I'm not being dramatic. Like, this is it. Unless somebody pulls one out of the woods somewhere that was somebody else's wrecking yard, there's not a lot of them left. So, Yeah,
we have this reoccurring theme that seems to be a hot topic, especially in our social medias, and a topic of a lot of heated debate, which is the restoration trades are dying, right? And sounds like you would probably agree with that, right? Do you have any, since you're in the thick of it, do you have any, thoughts on why that might be, or what are you seeing in that arena?
Part of my industry, I don't like to call myself a restoration shop, because the guys that buy our trucks are using them. I see them in social media, and they got brush scratches down them, and they're half sunk in the lake launching a boat. Like, they're doing stuff. And so we have to build these trucks beyond restoration. Like, we have to build them for hard use, like I said before. So, but anyway, yeah, I get younger guys that didn't have any history with them. Like I had to go out of my way to learn this stuff because I grew up on a farm, but my dad, like we didn't fix stuff. Like if something broke, you just bought another one or whatever. You lived with it being broken. Like there, it wasn't
rig it somehow.
Yeah.
You do a lot of rigging,
a lot of crescent wrench and baling wire or baling twine, and that was it. And so when I got my first Scout and started getting immersed in the automotive industry, I was like, I have to figure this out myself. Like I didn't go to school for automotive. I didn't, nothing. So same with fabrication. I quit a really good paying job at a pressure washing company that I was a manager at. Like I probably could have retired from that place, but I wanted to do this but I didn't know how. So I went to work at a fab shop pushing a broom. I left a $30 an hour job to go work at a $14 an hour job just so I could learn how to weld. Because I looked at the schools like Fab School, and there's another one, Wyotech has a fab program. Right. And, I was like, I don't want to pay and then get out of that and still be entry level. Because that's what happens. Yeah. They sell it up like, oh, you're going to be a Harley mechanic. And then you show up and they're like, oh, sweep the floor. Yeah. So I just started doing that. And sure enough, I worked my way up, became a lead welder at a shop and then left that one, went to another shop. And so before long, I was making $30 an hour again. It just was welding and doing, and then I could put that towards my hobby at the time. But anyway, it's hard to find people. There's still people interested in that for sure. But there's a lot less drive. I get guys that they come in and they're hard workers, but it's, I need this Friday off and I need that Monday off. And I just don't want to come in today, and that happens a lot.
And part of it may be the commitment, what you just described, and that is people not willing to take a step back and take a $15 an hour cut and pay or whatever for the learning process, not seeing that in the long run, it's better for them.
Possibly. And that's a big ask though. I mean, you can't that's ridiculous. That's like telling people you don't like where you're at, just move. Well, that's really hard. Yeah. Like some people are willing to make that sacrifice and can do it, but some people can't. And my thing is I don't expect anybody to care about the business like I do, because it's my baby, it's my life, it's everything, or the brand. But what I do want people to care about is their job. Like, make sure that fastener is tight. Make sure you got paint on that panel before you weld it on to the other one. Like, just taking some pride, taking the steps. You're getting paid by the hour. So might as well do it. Don't rush through it to try and impress me. And that's some of these guys, they want to get through it so they can get on to the next thing, because whatever. And so, there's people that just don't have that. I don't know if it's a work ethic that just isn't instilled anymore, or it's lost, because the agriculture stuff has been getting smaller and smaller. There's less home mechanics. There's less. You don't need to fix your car. I remember back in the day, you were still doing your own tune-ups in your driveway with points
oil
and
changes and exactly.
That's why it's in the owner's manual.
Yeah.
Servicing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and very few people do that anymore. Yeah. You just drive it to Jiffy Lube and whatever, and and some of it's cultural. I don't want to go down the divorced parent rabbit hole, but sometimes if you don't have your dad around, and I know sometimes that's a heated thing too, and I'm sure you'll get some comments about that. But sometimes you needed a dad to show you some stuff, and like my grandpa, like he being the Ford guy, and I'd go spend the summers down in Pahrump, Nevada with him and sweat my butt off in the shop while he's, working on some 41 Ford Super Deluxe, and it's like, okay, I learned a few things there, but not really. My grandpa wasn't a teacher. He was just like, get out of the way.
But something must have sparked, because look at the path you've taken. So something must have sparked.
I played with Legos a lot when I was a kid. I like to
build. Could do it too.
I like to build stuff. I was always creative. Loved like science and shop class and that kind of thing. I was always bored in school, bored at regular jobs. Growing up on the farm, my dad had a job at the sawmill, and then he was a logger when the sawmill shut down for a while. But we always made money like selling firewood or selling hogs or doing, he would go do a tree service job where there's a dangerous tree in someone's backyard and he could fall it and not hit their house. But it was quick cash, just make some money and not have a boss. And I remember through my 20s, I just hated having a boss. I hated it. And so I worked for small companies. I usually would go to these mom and pop businesses where there's just a couple of employees and we were all friends. They weren't bosses. They were just friends. But after the Great Recession, I had lost my job and was homeless for a little while and was able to get back on my feet. I went back to work welding at a shop in Central Oregon. But while I was doing that, I was flipping internationals out of my backyard. I'd buy a Scout off Craigslist and build it and sell it on the internet because social media was starting to take off. 2010, my Facebook, I had Instagram, and suddenly I was getting inquiries like, hey, that's a nice Scout. You want to sell it? I'm like, well, okay, sure. So then I was buying these trucks and I was having leftover trucks. There's the boneyard part in my backyard, which was great, And so then I got into an argument with my boss one day, and I said, you know what? I think I'm done. I pushed my toolbox out the door of the shop, and he's screaming at me that I'll be back in 4 months, and it's the dumbest thing I've ever done, and, whatever. Well, that was 10 years ago. And so
hasn't looked back since.
Yeah.
Is he still waiting for you to come back?
Well, he actually went out of business, and
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's weird. I see him at the parts store sometimes, and I'm just like, how's it going?
Yeah, awkward.
Yeah.
Well, I can just say from your stories, I think what you're driven by passion, and you don't want to fail. It sounds like you got a love for these international harvesters, and that's what drives you.
Yeah,
and you've done a great job. I mean, again, it's look how far you've come in 14 years.
Yeah, it's what I know. I've devoted my whole memory bank to just learning everything about them and being a knowledgeable person. And like I said, I think it's for the old guys. Like there's no one else absorbing their memory, their information. In hanging out with these old guys, it's not just internationals. You pick up a lot of other life hacks and stuff.
Sure.
Some old guys have some pretty good some stories that,
Do you ever visualize yourself like 30 years from now as the cranky old man who knows everything about international harvesters? People coming to you going, how do I fix this?
Well, I think I'm the cranky old man now. That's the thing is Josie, my better half, said that I was born a 60-year-old man. I mean, that's everything about me is old stuff, all my shirts have buttons on them, and, I solely drive the old trucks, and, we have the old fridge in our house, and it's all old. You walk into our house and it kind of looks like here, where it's just a display of old stuff. And,
So you feel at home here is what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I totally dig it. Like, this is great. That's part of why I reached out to you initially, because of the vibe, and also it's helped spreading the IH word, because I don't want that brand to die. I don't want it to be forgotten. I don't want it to just be I don't want it to be Studebaker, or something else where if you have a Studebaker, it's because there's something, it's like, oh, somebody willed it to you and you're stuck with it, like I very, it's a small community, and I don't want to offend the Studebaker guys because I know they're passionate about theirs as well. Yeah. The niche markets are, because Studebaker was big too. All these companies during the war that were huge. Packard, I mean, if it wasn't for Packard, we probably wouldn't have won the war.
and engineering wise, Studebaker was known for cutting edge back then. So and it is interesting how it changed. But I mean, if you go back and study the history of a lot of these brands, they were cutting edge at the time.
Yeah, that's what I think. If a lot of especially the younger generation, really knew this stuff, because I think with the younger generation, they also because there's so much information out on the internet now that's available at fingertip. But this type of stuff, you have to dig. Some of this stuff is not available on the internet. Right. Some of the old timers that you're talking to are probably giving you tidbits that have not even publicly known.
Yeah.
Right. So now you're able to share this type of stuff. And that's why I think that's why we're here, was to document this stuff, to tell stories like yours, to at the very least keep the memory alive of that, whether, you're definitely keeping the brand alive, at least in your own little aspect. But you had mentioned to us before the show that it looks like there'll be another Scout, or some version of a Scout coming out again.
That's right.
And most likely with some kind of electrified powertrain. So, I mean, it'll be a different Scout, obviously, than what you're doing. How do you think that will play into the future for your business?
Well, I mean, it's already increased. Just the marketing that Scout Motors has been doing has increased awareness to the Scout brand. But people that are coming in don't realize that they were just a model from a larger company. Some people think they're like, oh, that's Scout's a Scout, and that happens. Then that's been that way for a while. Like people will go, oh, that's one of those Scout pickups. I'm like, no, it's an International, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant. It's International, And so Scout has always kind of been like a brand. And now that Volkswagen is reviving it, it's supposed to be an electric SUV. There's a lot of, I don't want to say promises out there, like, oh, it's going to be off-road savvy and it's going to do this. And there's a lot of renderings that have been floating around, but nothing hard, no real good details other than it will be all EV. It is not, there's no hybrid, there's no diesel option. It's straight EV, which turns a lot of the purists and us off right out of the box. But I look at it as it's its own entity. It's its own thing. It's not going to affect me. Like, I'm not going to start parting out new Scouts. like that's not, I have no interest in anything new. Like I said, 1980 is where we stop. And so
if someone brought one of those new ones in and say, I want you to rip this electric motor out and put a Cummins diesel in it, would you do it?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. I like to focus on what I know, and just stick around. But yeah, I mean, there's already, the joke is that if I'll be the first one to part a new Scout out, but I don't think I'd go that far.
So you were telling us that they're building a factory right now in South Carolina?
I believe it's South Carolina. Yeah.
And maybe 2026 is what they're looking at for a debut?
Yeah. I think the prototype rollout is supposed to be 26.
And you don't think that's going to have much of an effect? I mean, I guess you have that like a updraft where sometimes, when these companies come out with something new, and all of a sudden puts the old into the spotlight.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll happen here?
Yeah, and they have somewhat already, because several of the executives of Scout Motors have purchased Scouts from other shops and are driving them, and they're in all of their marketing, all the advertisements. Everything that Scout Motors is putting out right now is all old Scouts. And
so they're going to play up maybe legacy, the history of it a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing.
But that's got to make you cringe a little bit.
It's a fine line for me to walk, but I feel like it's a little bait and switch.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here, look at these classic iron, vintage, whatever. And then, oh, here's our new sleek, streamlined Scout.
Half made of plastic. And
yeah, it's like, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not. And that's why I'm not worried or not putting any thought into the new ones.
Sure.
Like, it's not, it's just a different thing, Yeah, it might have the same Scout script logo.
Yeah.
But it's not an international harvester.
Correct.
So just Scout.
Yeah. It's Scout. Kind of like, I think it's how Dodge turned into Ram.
Right.
There's no more Dodge. It's a Ram truck.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be the similar. At least that's how I'm putting it in my mind. I'm like, it's not an international. It's just a Scout. So.
Interesting. We'll keep an eye on that one for sure.
Yeah, and you'll start to see more of it. I mean, Motor Trend's been putting out articles and stuff, which I want to backtrack really quick about the information that's out there. There's a few sources that keep getting regurgitated by these automotive journalists that just, recite the first article they find on Google. And there's some misinformation, like they're wrong, but it keeps getting repeated so many times that it's wrong,
Which means it'll become the truth at some point.
Which a lot of people, do believe as the truth. And so there's some resources out there that help set things straight. There's a great forums website called Binder Planet that you can go to, and there's all kinds of stuff there people can learn about. If you really want to learn the right stuff. Because there's even a book that somebody wrote in the 80s that people or the 70s that people consider as like, I don't want to say the Bible, but it's like a go-to, and there's tons of misinformation in that. So if there's a book anybody wants to read, there's a Scout Encyclopedia that was put out a few years ago by John Glancy and Jim Allen. Jim Allen was a head writer for Four Wheeler magazine for years and years. So those two spent a lot of time at the Historical Society where all the documents from International are, and put this book together based on that. And so it's extremely accurate. So if anybody out there is, wants to learn more about internationals, and there's the Scout Encyclopedia, so it's just Scouts, but there are some good books out there, or the Binder Planet. It's a great place to learn.
Or they could tune into your podcast and learn from you directly.
Yeah. And I cover a lot of topics there too, but I have work to do. So what happens is I get phone calls all day that people want tech support. They're like,
that's hard. Yeah.
I'm working on this. I saw your podcast, but you didn't cover this. And can you tell me how to change my engine? And I'm like, I've got paying jobs out here that I got to work on, So
Sure.
that is the catch-22 of social media. I mean, I've got 90,000 Instagram followers. And so my DMs are full of people that are like, how do I get my brakes apart? How do I do this? And I'm like, I mean, I do have a subscription. It's like $1.99 a month. I'm like, subscribe, and then you can send me a message, and I'll help you out, which I feel is kind of a jerk move sometimes.
Yeah, but it's knowledge. I mean, you're passing on a knowledge that they need, and
that has lots of value.
Has tons of value to it.
Yeah, it is. I feel a little weird about it, because then some people are like, they'll go on Facebook and then they're like, I'm not paying that blowhard, to tell me how to do it. Like, somebody else tell me how to do it. And then they'll get 30 responses that half of them are wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, good luck with that one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you got to survive like anybody else, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing is I try hard to do my business fairly. Our shop rate's only $100 an hour, and I'm pretty lenient on our hours, because some stuff, takes you 3 hours when it should have only taken an hour and a half. And so I'm like, just, whatever. Yeah. And so, it's tough to make I don't want to say make a living, but with anything in the automotive industry right now, it's having a hard time finding the guys that are efficient and do the job right. And then, that you can still make a profit on at the end of the day.
It's a tightrope.
It is. Like I said, I didn't go to school for business or anything, so I'm learning as I go. And my guys definitely eat better than I do. I make sure payroll's taken care of first, and then if there's anything left over, then it's usually pays the bills after that. So yeah.
Wow. Well, we covered a lot, and wow, it's been almost an hour and a half.
I learned a lot today.
No, totally. Absolutely. So if somebody does want to reach you, it sounds like a lot of people do already.
Yeah.
But if they have any questions they want to reach you, what's the best way to reach you? Website, social media?
So our website, binderboneyard.com, has a chat feature and a DM feature. You can reach out there. Our Instagram is probably a good resource for reaching out as well. Same thing, Binder Boneyard. I'm Binder Boneyard on pretty much everywhere.
YouTube too.
Yes, YouTube.
Yeah.
That one I don't. I respond to comments and stuff, but I don't do a lot of back and forth. Like if someone wants to help walking through something, I don't spend a lot of time there, which happens. I get the weirdest messages. Google Messenger, like I'll get an alert on my phone and I'm like, what is this? And then somebody's like, how do I get my window regulator out? I'm like, why did you message me on this of all the platforms? like how to
I know that one. I see those too. I'm like, Messenger. It's like a freaky colored like lightning bolt or something.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
I'm not big into the social media either. Thank God Gabe knows what the hell he's doing, because I'm just not one of those guys. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
It's grandma. Oh, shit.
Yeah, people, it's so bizarre how people just go the longest way around to get something. And I'm like, why didn't you just call me?
Yeah, you have a phone number on your website. No one wants to call the phone number.
Yeah, phone numbers ever, or the other way around. They want to buy something from the website, but they don't want to buy it on the website. They want to talk to me on the phone and order it with their credit card because they don't trust the internet. I'm like,
but
man,
they'll spit their credit card number to a stranger on the phone.
Yeah. But they want to know like if it's going to work on their thing and whatever. And I understand doing the homework before you buy a part. But when you buy it through us, then the tracking is different. Like it's so much more legwork for us. The automation of a website, a web store is so great now that like it saves us a ton of time and it's whatever. But no, these old guys, they want to call and tell me about their, whatever. And there's always a story and there's some backstory and then there's something else. And again, like Josie, sometimes I feel so bad for her because she does most of the phone answering because I can't anymore. I have to work. And if I'm always on the phone, wrenches aren't getting turned. Yeah. And so somebody will call and they'll be like, oh, I'm looking for whatever. And she'll go, well, she'll ask them a couple questions. And they'll go, honey, is your husband home?
Oh, geez.
And that happens a lot.
That's messed up.
Yeah. And she's just like, he's working. This isn't our home. I can answer a lot of your questions. Like, give me a chance, whatever. Or she just is like, nope, and hangs up. Because some of these old guys are pretty cantankerous. And I hear her on the phone sometimes because I can hear the office from where I'm working sometimes. And I automatically know what they ask for when I hear her tone change. And she's like I said, bless her, she's getting very knowledgeable. She didn't want to learn this stuff, but through, all the side effects of COVID and things like that, she ended up coming to work for me. Mm-hmm. And she's doing great. And I'm so glad she's there. I couldn't get the stuff done I get done if it wasn't for her.
She's on the front lines. Right?
She is. Yeah, she is. She is taking most of the phone calls and she does all the eBay shipping and all the store shipping and things like that. So, all that, the tedious grunt work that makes the business roll, she's handling. And so, yeah, I definitely can't get out of this podcast without mentioning her and how much I love her and how much, it's important.
So all the guys that are listening to this right now that are thinking that they can call and get one by her, that ain't going to happen. You got to go through the gatekeeper, Josie. So,
Yeah.
And she knows her stuff.
She does. She's very analytical. Like we have all the books. Like I've bought several old dealerships and they always come with parts catalogs and things like that. So if someone's looking for something, she can thumb through the parts manuals and find it pretty fast. And then, we can just determine if we have it or not through our own inventory. And there's times where she has to like put the guy on hold and then she yells out the window, hey, do we have that? And then, because my brain, I know where it all is. Yeah. I'm one of those guys that, there's like a path through my brain and there's just stuff piled up and I know exactly where it is. And so there's times where I'm like, yeah, we got that. And then one of the other guys, because I do have a dedicated parts puller, I send him out to pull apart if it's not already pulled. And because we've got these 40-foot Connexes that have shelves in them and they're all categorized and loaded up, and so if they're not there, then I have to go pull the part and whatever. It's a thing, but she's great, and I need about 5 more guys. Like I'm so busy and behind, and these parts trucks that need to get parted out and cataloged. Like I need help, and it's tough. It's tough just finding guys, and I'm also in a small area. Like there's only 100,000 people in our whole community. Like it's our workforce pool is pretty shallow. So it's all a compounding problem. And I've often kicked around the idea of firing everybody except for Josie and just going back to a one-man shop where I do 2 trucks a year by myself and just, what we make is what we make. And, but I feel again, I need to grow the brand to help grow the IH word. Sure. Like if, it's going to take forever for, me to get the word out there if I'm doing it all by myself.
Sure. Yeah. So after we wrap up here, you jump into your truck and head back to Oregon.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I may pick up some axles along the way for a customer who wants some axle work done. So like I said,
it never ends, does it?
No, it's killing all the birds with the one stone.
Killing flocks here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you have to hustle. Like I have to grow this business to what I want it to be. Because what but the end goal, and you may appreciate this with your museum, I want to have an International Harvester Museum. I have all the original plans from the 1949 prototype dealership program. So I could have a dealership built to now in the style of the original.
Oh, wow.
That would be cool.
That's what I want. And I want to be able to have it so that a guy can drive there to visit in his Scout or pickup, pull in, take a picture like his Scout is part of the showroom floor, and then be able to drive it out.
Oh, that'd be
fun. But I've got containers full of original NOS IH parts still in the boxes and all this stuff. And we do sell a lot of that stuff. I mean, I can't hang on to it because I go broke in no time. But I end up with multiples of a lot of stuff. And so the multiples get set aside. And then someday, like I said, if I can ever scrape the money together to build this dealership building and set it up. But I want it to be full service, like the back half to be the actual restoration shop, just like I have now. But the front half be parts counter, displays, some of it for sale, some of it not, but history, all that. Like that's my goal, is just to keep it alive. Because the West Coast doesn't have that. The Midwest does. There's several old IH dealers that are still family owned, like 4th generation IH dealers that they don't sell any parts anymore. They just kept the building and kept the sign up. And, every once in a while, a Scout Club will meet there for some pictures and then they go, whatever. But the West Coast doesn't really have that. And so that's my plan, as I really want to put this dealership together and this experience for people. And, I'm 45. I'd really like to have it done before I die. So that's why I got to hustle so hard.
You got quite a few years to make it happen.
Yeah, I do. But, I'm just pushing, like, the social media is really hard to help sell parts and grow the brand because, part sales is 24 hours a day. Which is nice. I love to wake up in the morning and see that I had 8 eBay sales. I'm like, great, and then I'm like, Josie, you're going to be really busy. So that's the thing. That's the There's just it's hard to describe. I can't because I am so passionate about it. Sometimes I get really excited and then I can't say the words. So I'm just like this and stuff, and I point and the pictures and because I do. It just, my phone is full of old dealership pictures to help get layout right and how I want the lot to look and how I want this. And it's just, we have a square of dirt that it could go on, but to build the building and set it up, is $600,000. Sure. It's just crazy with the modern requirements that they have and codes.
Well, luckily
and stuff.
You're not doing it here in California.
Yeah.
It would never happen.
No.
Right?
Not for that price.
Yeah, at least you're in Oregon up there. Yeah. We'd probably have a better chance of it happening.
Slightly better. Slightly better. But it's we've often kicked around the idea of leaving Oregon and going to like Nevada, partially for the weather. Central Oregon's great. It's sunny 300 days a year there, but it does snow sometimes, and it's not, whatever. But I spent a lot of time in southern Nevada as a kid, and I kind of like that area. And I'm like, man, we could move the business there, and then really it'd probably do better. But I got to get my guys to move or hire all new guys and move. Moving 100 and something trucks plus all the shipping containers and all my stuff. It's like, I couldn't do it. So I'm kind of stuck where I am unless I really get some big jobs that come through and, make some quick money. But
well, let us know what happens, because I'd love the sound of that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
That'd be fun.
That'd be cool.
Fun to watch the
Very
process.
Cool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Did we cover everything?
Alex,
you're quiet over there. It's like, are you soaking all this in?
Are you nervous, or are you just
well, the one thing I wanted to ask, is there any international dealer building still standing anywhere on the West Coast?
There might be. The last couple that I knew of, the old guy had died and the family sold the property off, and like the one in Portland, he was the last IH dealer in the country, functioning dealer. Ernie Bizio was his name. He died about 10 years ago, and the family sold off that lot, and now there's a high-rise condo there.
Oh, no.
But no, as far as the 1949 prototype buildings, I don't think there's any left on the West Coast. I went through is it Fall River in Northern California, right on the Nevada border. And there's an IH dealership still there with the sign and stuff, but it was just like a rectangle building. Like it wasn't the cool one with the spire and all the windows and all that. So there's some IH buildings around, but they're not that. They're not that I've seen. But the Midwest still has them, you know, because International was based out of Chicago. That was their home. And then they grew to Springfield, Ohio, and Fort Wayne, Indiana. All the Scouts were made in Fort Wayne. And they actually bought the Buick engine plant after the war. They moved into the Buick plant and then modified it for what they needed. But yeah, so International is really a Midwest based.
It would make sense too, because again, as you said, they were a powerhouse with the farming industry. So it would make sense that that's where they would be based out of.
Yep. Yeah. And like John Deere was there, and Moline, and places like that. So they were all kind of close, and yeah, the iron is right there. I mean, International had its own ship to bring iron across the Great Lake. Like they had their own towns that all they did was mine coal. It was an International owned town for coal. They were like, because Ford did that too. Ford had its own towns. I think Ford maybe got the idea from International because they were doing it in the 1800s. Like Cyrus McCormick was buying whole places for the oak trees, just for the certain implements, and then replanting the oak because they figured they were going to be making these implements forever.
Right.
Little did they know technology would, a lot less oak into stuff nowadays. But they had whole stands of timber dedicated to products. Like, yeah, it was.
Wow.
They had a plan.
Well, you're certainly knowledgeable about it all. You had to write your own book. I mean, you got the podcast. I mean, you got so much time on your hands. Why don't you just write a book?
Yeah, right.
I'll do that while I'm driving.
Well, you got 13 hours back home, right? If you don't, without stops, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And it's going to be an uneventful trip back home.
It should be. The truck's running great now after everything else. I've done some tuning and some fine-tuned changed the fuel pump and got all that figured out. So it should be pretty smooth going back. Yeah.
All right.
Let's hope so.
All right. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Going through all that hell to get here. So we appreciate it, really do. And it's just a very interesting story. And stay in touch. You always have an invitation to come back here and
thank you.
Fill us in on your plans.
Yeah, I may be back next year if we put another race car together.
Oh, absolutely.
Keep us informed on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely follow along on the socials. I'm very active there, so there's always an update usually there. But I'm around. I'm everywhere all at once, all the time. So
Binder Boneyards, not Binder. Binder Boneyards.
No S. No S. Just
Binder Boneyard.
Binder Boneyard.
Okay. Yep. That's right. There's one. There's one. There isn't multiple boneyards.
Not yet.
There's one boneyard.
Not yet.
As soon as he builds the building, he's going to stick an S at the end of it. Right?
No. The building's going to be Dan's IH dealership.
There you go. All right. Thanks again, Dan.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Don't forget, follow, subscribe. We have our YouTube
channel.
And go to our website, westoftulsa.com. I didn't do this at the top, so I'm going to do it now. But it's working. People are actually contacting us.
Yes.
I love it. So go to our website, westoftulsa.com. Go on the tip line page. Click on that. And just like Dan, we'll have you in studio.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, listening, whatever you're watching and listening on. And we'll see you west of Tulsa.